Hi friends, Rebecca here. I am just popping in to let you know before the episode starts that there is a trigger warning for a brief discussion of suicide, and I don't have the exact timestamps because I haven't finished editing yet, but I will provide those in the show description. So if you need to skip that little section, just go to the description and see where those timestamps are. All right. Thank you for listening. This is going to be a good episode. I'm very excited for this one. I will let you get to it. Hi friends, welcome back to Not Again, the podcast that brings college-level analysis to preschool-level content. I'm one of your hosts, Rebecca, and Alan's not here today because I kicked him out whenever I have a guest spot. You know that happens. With me today is Dan McCoy of the Flophouse podcast. Hi, Dan.
Hello, it's me, Dan McCoy of the Flophouse podcast.
And other things as well, but, you know, I think that probably the podcast is the most important thing you've ever done in your life, right?
Well, I mean, it's certainly in terms of anyone, like, personally knowing who the heck I am. I mean, I'd like, unless you're combing through television, like, credits at the end of the Daily Show, I don't think, this is it. This is it. This is what I'll be remembered for.
I don't know. I mean,
for worse.
I think podcasting is the way of the future. So being remembered for that is totally A-okay. But yes, you're a writer for the Daily Show, which is why I was just shocked to see that you had time for our little podcast. So today we are talking about The Secret of NIMH. And for the first time in my life, my notes have reminded me to say this. Spoiler alert for the entire movie of The Secret of NIMH. If you don't want this 1982 movie spoiled for you, stop listening, go watch it, come back, because we are not really going to hold anything back there. Okay, I've said that about 3 times out of 42 episodes. I never remember to say a spoiler alert. I just kind of assume it's intuitive. All right. I had not seen this movie before, and I convinced myself I had. I was sure that I had seen it, and it turns out that I think I must have seen trailers for it, like watching as a kid, like ABC Family would be like, and playing tonight, Secret of NIMH, like, and then they would show like the little mouse with her amulet or whatever, because I recognized that scene. And so I was like, I have seen this movie. And then I watched it because it's on Prime, and I was like, I have not seen this movie. So that was very interesting for me to kind of go into it completely blind and not knowing what was happening. So I watched it twice, actually, this weekend, just once to kind of absorb and once to, you know. I mean, that's, for this podcast, that's a very, twice is nothing. I have seen Finding Nemo and Frozen many more times than that. So, yeah, so twice as easy.
See, I come at this movie from the opposite standpoint, which is my parents were very early adopters of HBO, which is weird because I don't think that they particularly care about movies, but it made me care about, like, and I saw this over and over again as a child to the degree that, like, I then rewatched it for this podcast, but, you know, the last 20 minutes I was kind of rushing. I had to do other things. So I was I was making tuna salad while watching it. So I didn't quite pay as much attention to the very end when refreshing myself, but I also, like, it's so struck to my memory. I was like saying lines along in the similar tone.
So you remember, so like, was it like a nostalgia kick for you, or like you kind of saw it and you remembered the childhood, you know, memories and whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, it's something that I have very fond feelings about, and also I kind of was curious how it hold up, you know, and also, like, it didn't really matter because Audrey didn't end up watching the second half with me. We watched it over two days, but, like, I had tickets to at the Alamo. One of the reasons why I'm so filled with time for podcasts right now is the show is on a summer hiatus for a couple weeks before we, like, get back and start thinking about how we're going to do it once we get back to the studio after this pandemic.
Like, that would be I think a lot of people are contending with that.
Yeah, so I had tickets to an Alamo screening of An American Tail, Don Bluth's other huge mouse movie, and Audrey thought that I had tickets for the other one, and she's like, oh, great, we can see it. And then she's like, oh, I'm not interested in that. And then I was like, okay, well, let's watch Secret of NIMH for the podcast. And then we just didn't have time to watch it together. So that was a very not illuminating backstory to us watching this. But
that's fine. Has she seen it before?
I thought she said that she hadn't. Then when we were watching it, I think she had seen the movie but didn't remember much about it, but had read the book several times.
Yes, there's a book.
And didn't recall that much about it other than she thought it was very sad.
It is. It's an interesting story, and I found out because of Amazon's little X-ray thing that they had to change Mrs. Brisby's name from the original Mrs. Frisbee because they were worried about getting sued by the Frisbee people.
They were worried that Whammo would take them down.
Yes, which, love that. It's not even spelled the same. But yeah, so, okay. Well, Don Bluth. Yeah, I did, that was one of my notes when you said, like, Don Bluth's other mouse venture. Like, I was thinking about how many mouse/rat protagonists they have just thrown at children over the years. And I had a list. I put The Great Mouse Detective, Ratatouille, Mickey Mouse, even though his resemblance to an actual mouse is, but, there he is. And then American Tail, which was an entire, well, not a series, but they made multiples of that one, I think. And then this movie. And so I don't know if it's just like the symbolic value of like the mouse is the ultimate, it sounds punny, but underdog, like they're so small and meek and so many, it's hard for them in the big bad world and we can empathize because it's also hard for us in the big bad world. And like, I don't know what it is, but there's so many like mouse and Tom and Jerry even. Although I'm not sure, who are we supposed to root for in Tom and Jerry? Jerry, right? I think he's kind of a jerk. But...
yeah, well, that's the ultimate question about Tom and Jerry. Part of why I don't particularly like Tom and Jerry, because I'm like, I guess I'm supposed to root for the mouse because, like, he's turning the tables on the cat. But the thing is, over the course of several shorts, like, I no longer think of the cat as the overdog to flip it. Like, I'm like, ugh, this mouse keeps beating up this cat, this poor cat.
The mouse is a bully, basically.
Yeah. And the recent movie that we did for the Flophouse, my own podcast, like, I hated it in large part because it was like, I can't sympathize with this mouse jerk.
Was that the one with Chloe Grace Moretz? Because I heard,
I mean, it had a lot of problems. Yeah, but, it did. That was one of the big ones.
One of the problems I heard about was just that it was the Tom and Jerry movie, but it didn't seem to feature Tom and Jerry that heavily. I heard your episode on it, but I didn't see the movie, and so usually the details kind of slip by unless I re-listen. Okay, so I guess we should start talking about this movie. Yeah, Don Bluth. He's an interesting guy. So he's making movies, and you can definitely see that this is Disney adjacent, especially like if you draw parallels to the Fox Robin Hood one, like you can see a lot of the same facial expressions and drawings and stuff like that. We'll get to that later with the rat named Justin. But okay, so I have two problems with this rat and his magic diary. One is that he has magic ink. I don't like them. Yeah. The magic ink has never been explained. I guess, did they not want to animate him writing, or, I mean, like, basically, I didn't know this. I was curious about why NIM was in all caps, but when I found out it stands for the National Institute of Mental Health, I was surprised. I was like, oh, yeah, that is, considering how much magic has been in this movie so far, that's not where I thought they were going with it. So I don't really know how, like, scientific experiments on rats led to rats having magical diary ink. Like, that was confusing to me.
Let's kick it off right here, because, I mean, this is the biggest problem. Spoiler alert to my own reaction to the movie. I thought it held up, in large part, really well, other than the one big flaw with the movie, which is this that you're talking about. Which, the movie starts with him just sort of waving his quill over a book, and then words appear under it, and it seems like maybe they didn't want to animate writing, but also his narration doesn't line up to what's being written. It's kind of like, I think we're supposed to think that Nicodemus is actually kind of like just like thinking to himself, but he also is writing a thing at the same time, so it's very unclear filmmaking.
Yeah, I noticed that for sure. I actually had that as my note, that he was writing about what she reads later, I think, about the cat, dragon, and whatever, but that's not what he's narrating. Yes. So, confusing. But
the book, Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim, is from what I understand, I actually haven't read it somehow, even though I was an avid reader, particularly of Newbery books, and I think it may have gotten one, but I may be wrong on that. But it was like a more straightforward, it was just a sort of a science fiction concept of like the National Institute of Mental Health, is performing tests on lab animals, rats and mice, as are the most common, and which made them super intelligent, which allowed them to escape, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's a fantasy book for kids about smart mice and rats, but it is a science fiction based fantasy, not a fantasy. And Don Bluth, like, I was looking up sort of stuff related to this, and earlier drafts hewed closer to just like, okay, this is just sci-fi. And then Bluth's quote on Wikipedia, at least, was like, I feel like animation, you just need something magical in there. And it's like, no, you don't, man. Like, the movie's so good.
Oh, okay.
And it works, like, the plot makes sense in and of itself, where it's like, okay, these smart rats are helping this mouse out of, like, her husband helped them in the past. But then, like, also you're kind of a wizard rat, and you give Mrs. Brisby an amulet that has it's like it glows when you're courageous, and then, like, spoiler alert, it's like
and it has a mysterious message on it.
Yeah, at the end it's like what saves everything.
Yeah.
And I guess that's just like, oh, we need some sort of item that exemplifies the power of love. Huey Lewis in the News, the power of love. But you don't need it. You don't need it. Like, the whole movie is about how much this, like, very, like, simple but brave mother mouse just wants to, like, save her son who's sick. And you get the message without there being an amulet that glows with the power of her love for her child.
Yeah, I totally agree, especially since it has, like, an inscription on the back that never comes into play. Because the inscription is, you can unlock any door if you have the key. But no doors, I would even say no metaphorical doors were opened with that amulet. Like, the amulet pulls a cinder block out of a muddy swamp puddle sinkhole thing.
Yeah.
There are no doors being opened. Not even the door to her heart or the door to, like, understanding. Nothing at all. So I was very upset about this inscription. And, it didn't lead to anything. And the amulet did seem like a MacGuffin. And it's interesting now to think about, like, I just kind of, like, imagined this movie if you simply took the magic out of it. And it makes more sense because they were focusing on stealing the electricity from the farmer. I suppose I should summarize this movie in, like, a sentence for people who haven't seen it. There are these rodents that are intelligent, and one of the rodents, Mrs. Brisby, has 4 children, and one of her children is sick, and his name is Timmy because every sick child is named Timmy. Sorry if your name's Timmy. And she wants to get him better, but also the farmer that lives near them is going to start up his giant machinery equipment for whatever reason, and so she needs to move her house. And she enlists the help of some really intelligent rats. That's the movie.
You get this, like, so yeah, it's going to be harvest time, which means that the farmer is going to come through with his thresher, which means that you get the sense that this is something that happens every season to every year to these animals. They're like, oh, there's moving day. You have to be aware that there would be this day that we have to get out of the field because the field will be destroyed. And normally it would be fine. They just move. She cannot. She cannot move because Mr. Ages, the other smart mouse, like, there were 2 smart mice and several smart rats, and one of the smart mice is her late husband, and she goes and, like, Mr. Ages, like, he's got pneumonia, don't move him. Yeah. And so, yeah, she's in trouble. Like, she needs a solution to, she's screwed one way or the other, and needs to figure this out. And, all this takes her to the smart rats, some of whom are nice, some of whom are not.
Oh, yeah. Brutus does not get invited to a lot of potlucks, I imagine. But no, actually, so there's, like, you've already been reciting my notes pretty much word for word in a way that it's somewhat eerie. So I'm trying to figure out which one I want to touch on first. I guess, for one thing, the context of moving day for a human being who is the only species watching this movie, I hope, is you leave a place and don't come back. And so for a while I was like, why do they come back if they move? Just don't come back to where but I think the way you said it shed some light on it, in that they don't just they literally move, as in they physically move their bodies somewhere else for a while, and then like watch, and then they're like, okay, we can go back home now. Because I was like, if they move their house every year, just stay moved. Like don't go back to where the giant thresher is.
Yeah, or even simpler, like I don't know, like I can't remember whether it's the great owl that tells her this or Nicodemus later, but like the big line is like, you need to move your house to the lee of the stone.
Yes.
Which is the lee of the stone. This usage of the word lee, I think because of this story, mostly used in sort of like by sailors or whatever. It's a protected area. And so the idea is if you're on the other side of the stone, the thresher's not going to come. He's not going to like bend up his machine trying to thresh that area. So even simpler, it's like, why aren't you always living on the lee of the stone? I know that like they're living inside the cinder block and it was here anyway, but like if they're living inside the cinder block, shouldn't that protect them anyway? Look, let's not look too hard into the
No, that's the point of the podcast.
Logic of it.
We are supposed to just turn these. I mean, they're supposed to be intelligent, but here's the thing: because it's a kids movie, all the animals are intelligent. Like Auntie Shrew has not been injected with intelligence serum, and neither has Mrs. Brisby, but they're wearing clothes and chatting it up and like anticipating a farmer. So, I mean, the only difference is that the rats became more sentient and aware than the already adorable cartoon animals that are wearing clothes.
It's true. I did like elbow Audrey. There was one point where Mrs. Brisby, like, I think gets out of bed and she puts her shawl on. I was elbowing her. It's like, she was just naked.
Yes.
Like, because like that's the way the movie like makes you think about it. You're like, wow, Mrs. Brisby, put your clothes on.
I hate to bring up a traumatic experience for you, but this is the cat's problem. So my husband was asking me why it felt so uncomfortable when, for instance, like Idris Elba or what's his face, the overweight one, James Corden maybe, like they appeared without their clothes on when all the other cats weren't. And it's simply that if you show a character wearing clothes, your brain accepts, okay, this is a clothes-wearing character. So anytime they take those clothes off, they are symbolically getting naked in a way your brain can't really get around. And so, I thought the same thing. And it's weird, too, because when she's wearing the cloak, you see everything. I mean, everything, as far as, like, what a cartoon would have. But, like, for some reason, she looks clothed. But they're all wearing clothes. Yeah. I did think it was quite biblical, of course, because they're rats, and then they get intelligence, and as soon as they get knowledge, they put on clothes. It felt very Eden to me. You know, they gained knowledge, realized they were naked, and put on clothes of varying styles.
We'll get to it. But also, apparently, as soon as rats become intelligent, they start some sort of quasi-medieval society where they're all like, wearing swords, and one of them's a wizard, and they have a grand hall where they
a wizard, but also your majesty. Yeah, they shout things. I like the dude the lackey who's just like, let the lower species deal with their own. And I was like, oh, this is going some bad places. Someone needs to tell these rats about World War II. Like, we're not doing some good things. It was just like, okay, all right, we're getting to some heavy stuff. And this movie is rated technically G because the rating system hadn't changed yet. And so, like, there's blood and stabbing, and what's his face? Justin says, damn, at one point, and it's just like, this is G. And it's like, no, like, I would have been terrified if I was a child. I was scared of everything, to be fair, when I was a child. But
let's back up again. I would just like to say, like, Don Bluth, I don't know a ton about it, but Don Bluth was a Disney animator. He was a Disney animator who was sort of like there for a lot of the kind of, I think, frustrating period for animators where Disney budgets got smaller and smaller. They were looking for cheaper and cheaper ways of doing things, and like a lot of the old beautiful techniques were getting lost. And so Bluth and a couple of other animators defected and decided to set up their own production company, like to make animated movies, and they put a lot of their own money into making Secret of NIMH, and Secret of NIMH was their first one, and it was a big success, and still I think the most beautiful of them. Like they're like, I like An American Tail a lot too, like, and Spielberg produced that, so like there was weight behind Bluth for a while, and Disney continued to sort of tank for a little bit.
They were floundering for a while.
Yeah. And then post Little Mermaid, obviously they got into this second golden period that saved everything, and now Disney owns. I think bad news. I think they just bought this podcast, so
if only.
I'm afraid.
No, yeah.
But this is like such
monopoly.
a gorgeous movie, in part because like Bluth was like, no, we're doing this right. But on top of that, like it also, I wish that it was even more idiosyncratic than it is, in that I wish that, as I said, it would just not think that we need to put magic in this animated movie, but it takes a lot of risks in terms of tone, because there's like a lot of very scary set pieces in this. That was what I was trying to get back around to long-windedly with your saying about like its rating and everything. Like it has some like stuff that is burned in my brain because it is like more frightening than you would normally see in an animated movie, I think.
Oh yeah, I mean, but that's like I wrote in my notes that that's kind of Bluth's MO, because like if you look at Anastasia, Rasputin's head sinks into his chest cavity, and there's just an entire scene where Bartok just gets in there, and they just have a chat while like weird fluids and his rib cage are there. So he didn't care at all. I was about to, oh God, I'm bad at censoring myself. He didn't give a fig about what children thought about what would scare them and give them nightmares. And as I said, like everything gave me nightmares when I was a kid. Jumanji, Ghostbusters, Tiny Toon Adventures, just anything really, like my own shadow. I'm glad that I didn't see this movie when I was a child, because it would have given me nightmares. Like the Great Owl is the most what is it? The Great Owl, I think. Right?
I think so.
There's some descriptor for the owl. The point is that he's terrifying, and there's a giant spider that he crushes, and there's guts everywhere.
Especially because they mention it, although they kind of like gloss it over a little bit. I mean, owls eat mice. That's the primary, and like you get the sense that, okay, the Great Owl is, holding himself back in part out of deference, because like he knows like this is the widow of a special mouse who like everyone around, bears a great amount of respect for. But like, even so, there's this whole sense in that scene, like maybe at any point the owl's going to try and eat Mrs. Brisby. Yeah,
Mrs. Brisby, I mean, you just brought it up, so let's go there. She is defined the entire movie by her relationship to her husband, which is like really upsetting. She doesn't get a first name. The owl does not even give her the time of day until he knows who her husband is. And it's like typical owl, right? Just like, oh, women, right? Oh, wait, your husband was important? Okay. But like, she's still Mrs. Brisby. Nobody agrees to help her until they know her husband. And it's upsetting because for, I guess, feminism reasons or whatever, but like also because she is in her own right a very like strong character. I was surprised for maybe I'm being insulting, but I was surprised for 1982 to see such a strong female protagonist, and to have her constantly defined by her relationship to her husband as if that's the only thing that made her important, when she like took on an entire like plow or something like that by herself. She was just like, hang on, gotta go break this giant farming equipment. Like I was like, and I mean, like I noted that she was courageous, and then the amulet for some reason is sparked by bravery, and I was like, oh, okay, well, they did that right, I guess. Like they certainly made her courageous, but it's just like I wanted her to have a first name.
Yes, well, yeah, I see that stance. I think that part of what holds up well for me is what you're saying, though, like how strong she is. Like it can be looked at one of two ways. It can be looked at like that the movie is doing her a disservice through that, or that like, yeah, she is a mouse, this tiny mouse woman who everyone is underestimating, and then ultimately it becomes clear that like how strong she is, how much like her love and courage is going to pull her through. Like I really like that this is a movie that is an animated movie that is not about a princess or a love story or a curse or something. It's about a mom who really cares about her kids, a single mom who's really trying hard.
I think it's quite, it has a lot of progressive messaging for something like, I mean, considering how far back we have gone, I feel like we've gone backwards in recent times with just like how women are portrayed and stuff, but I think that's the only, well, not the only reason, but it bothered me that she didn't get a first name, because she certainly earned it. And yeah, I mean, despite the fact that Justin, the sexy rat, was like immediately ready to move in on the widow. Like he just like
I know.
Like,
I was like, how recently?
Question it. I don't know. How recently did he die? Because he was certainly like, hello, all right, my opportunity. And I was like, okay, you knew this dude, right? You were friends with Jonathan. But
yeah. Well, also, I mean, there's not the question of, knowing Jonathan in this case, but like Jeremy's totally into Mrs. Brisby too, right? Like the crow, like it seems like there's some sort of like, I'm just like, does this crow want to have sex with this mouse? Is that what part of what's going on here?
The predatory, like I didn't understand the point of the crow. It was like the crow was the Olaf of this movie. They put him in just because either Dom DeLuise was bored or they were like, kids like antics, right? They like horny crows. Let's put that in there. And it's just like, he didn't service the plot in any way at all.
He really is the only antics in the movie. And I find most of the antics pretty frustrating. There's scenes where he more organically seems to fit in that I like, where like when she's rescuing him in the first place and he's like all tangled up and she has to like bite through the yarn to get him out. I like that, or like him taking her to the owl. But then there's all the horrible scenes where it's just like he's just like coming by to bother her, basically.
Yes.
Wants her amulet. I'm like, go away, Jeremy. Like, and that was totally because from what I read that he was not supposed to be as much in the movie, but Dom DeLuise, like Bluth thought was funny, so increased his screen time. I want to do a shout out as long as we're talking about Mrs. Brisby. I also think that part of what's great about her is the voice performance is tremendous, I think, and
it's a stellar cast.
A stellar cast. They got Derek Jacobi as Nicodemus.
I was just about to bring him in. Yeah.
I Claudius himself.
Yeah.
But the Elizabeth Hartman is Mrs. Brisby, and I looked her up, and I was sad to find this was her last movie. She'd struggled with depression all her life, and she killed herself.
Oh my God, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I will bring the podcast down.
That's all right. We're never that entertaining.
But she has 16 IMDb credits. She was a stage actress, but apparently had a hard time with her own brain. But she's so great in this movie, I think. I
think she sold the part very well, and you hate to hear that. I mean, that sucks. I mean, like for some reason, it makes me think about Adrienne Shelley, who wrote Waitress. And started it. I mean, she was murdered, but it's still kind of just like that tragedy where it's just like you want them, I don't know. Obviously, you want them to still live. But.
Well, you want them to, you want them to be alive and happy for themselves, but also selfishly, you're like, oh, there's so much other great work they could have done.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's never happened.
Let's not necessarily bounce back, but take a lateral step into the biblical territory again. I had to look up Nicodemus. Because the name sounded like it was probably a reference name, but then it started talking about biblical stuff, and I don't know, like not only am I not so good with the Christian stuff, but like it was history, and I'm not good at that either. So like I often tell people like, oh, I'm Jewish, I don't get it, but like honestly, I'm not so good at Old Testament either. But it sounds like a good excuse at the time, But Nicodemus is like a biblical character, something about chatting with Jesus. I think they just chose the name because it sounded old-fashioned and cool.
Yeah.
Because I didn't really notice any parallels between the historical / religious figure and the character in the movie.
I do think that it's probably just like this sounds like a wise person's name, Nicodemus. Let's do it.
Yep, that's okay. Just checking. Anyway, I think maybe we got off track a little bit. I don't know. Let me just check my notes real quick.
Well, we can get back on track by mentioning that two of the children are played by Shannon Doherty and Will Wheaton.
You beat me to it.
Interesting. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm amused more than anything else. I was like, haha, I've come prepared. And it's like, no.
I'm big on like connections and looking up behind the scene. I am on several group chat things because of the quarantine last year. A lot of friends of mine are movie weirdos as well, and show bad movies or strange movies, and I'm always the one who is busy doing a deep dive and I like come in with a fact, and they're like, "Oh, Dan's Wikipedia corner is back again."
No, like I have to admit now how much of what's a non-curse word? A jerk I am. I was gonna mention Will Wheaton. I wasn't gonna mention. I was on the fence about mentioning Shannon Doherty. I was like, is she really
bad blood?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like she's done some stuff. She was in Charmed until she pissed off the other actresses enough to not be in Charmed anymore, and then she did like an ABC Family original movie about crows or something. I don't know. Not that I don't know. Will Wheaton's done some, like, I don't know. I feel like he does have more clout just by merit of being Will Wheaton. And he was on Leverage recently enough and stuff like that. So I don't know. I guess I'm just, I don't know, biased and awful in every way, shape, and form and judgmental.
Well, I will say that listening to it, I can hear the Will Wheaton in Martin. I can't really hear the Shannon Doherty in Teresa's voice.
Yeah, I mean, she has, as an adult, she has a much less...
Like a huskier...
Yeah, I was going to say, it's a much more, like, almost, like, soothing voice. So, yeah, to hear her as a squeaky little child is like, ugh. But, like, sometimes I don't even recognize Kirsten Dunst's voice. And she did a lot of child acting, and she was a voice actress as well. But, like, the way that she has changed as well. But, yeah, so, I mean, like, again, like, big-name actors and then actors who were going to become names as well. They pulled out all the stops, I feel like. And Mr. Ages, I know, is played by somebody important. But I...
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of the supporting Mr. Ages... Auntie Shrew.
Yeah.
Like these people are they tend to be like British actors who like had been working actors for years and like beloved character actors.
Yeah. You can tell from
John Carradine is the great owl.
Yes,
so
you can tell from their IMDb pictures when they're like profile pic on IMDb is more of like a character they've done than like a headshot. So
yeah.
So I knew that. But yeah, and Mr. Ages I wanted to talk about because I think that there has to be a name for this trope of this old man character who is all like antisocial and doesn't want visitors, but secretly has a heart of gold and will eventually be bullied into being helpful and then warms up to the main character. I mean, it sounds so specific, but I swear I've seen this character before, like several times. It's just kind of like the old recluse who eventually is like, yeah, I like you, I guess, or whatever. But I don't know.
It's called the Dan McCoy.
Oh, well, all right. Let's get on TV tropes and label it. I don't know if TV tropes is like Wikipedia where anyone can, probably not, but
yeah, I mean, I always think it like this is not exactly the same thing, but I always think of it as like the old guy at the end of the street who like the kids are scared about.
Well, I guess that's what, Home Alone, right?
Yeah, there you got that guy.
Yeah, I could see that. So yeah, I don't know. So he's that guy, you know, the one that is just like a Belle's dad, but from Beauty and the Beast, but like grumpy instead of goofy. But yeah, so I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of archetypes in this movie of just like every character, you know, fulfills a role. There's the hero, there's the wizard, there's the villain. He's got a goatee, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, all right, let's see here. So Mr. Ages, the mouse mom believes in God. This happens a lot in kids' movies with animals, and I always find it. Have I brought up God too much in this episode? I don't want to blaspheme. Like, if I blaspheme too much in one episode, I feel like it's going to be bad. But I just have to say that, like, it happened in Ratatouille as well. We're doing an episode on Ratatouille soon, and so I was rewatching it, and the rat dad, whose name is Dad, I think. I don't think he has a name. Remy's dad says, nothing's been poisoned so far, thank God. And I'm like, do you have a rat god, or do you think that the human god is watching out for you? Like, that's what I want to know. And I know that just like figures of speech that human beings who are the audience will watch and understand, but it's so funny to hear her be like, bless you, Mr. Ages. And it's like, you are a mouse. So, you know, come up with something else. So I thought that was interesting that the animals always believe in God, which I'm not saying is wrong. You can believe in God if you want to, even if you are an animal. Just trying to cover my tracks so that nobody gets angry at me. I already said, does this horny crow contribute anything to the plot at all?
He only cares about finding a mate.
Well, and
who, by the way,
yeah,
he does. Mate at the end. Were you going to say who the woman is? It's Edie McClurg does the the lady
I did not look
crow
her
at
up.
the end who only laughs.
She only
who,
laughs.
like,
That's
she
why I
does
didn't
not
even
have
think. Yeah.
a line, but once you know, you're like, oh, that is an Edie McClurg laugh.
I guess they got her in the studio one day and they were like, quick, laugh. But no, I was going to say two things. One, I think the only thing that he really does is give them like a natural-ish way to introduce the cat dragon. Not the cat dragon, for those who don't know the movie. The cat's name is Dragon, who, by the way, has a gland issue. And the owners should be a little scared of that. But the other thing is that the end of the movie, you were bringing up that he does find this female crow. And it's like, what was I rooting for him this whole time? Like, was I supposed to be waiting and with like bated breath, like, I hope he finds a mate or whatever. Like, it's just like, it seemed like they were really happy with this resolution to his arc. And I was like, it's a weird note to end this movie on, actually. And it's very sexual, overtly so.
I think like different types of love ultimately is like where the movie's trying to end. Like you've got the maternal love, and then you've got Jeremy and his new mate. Like Jeremy, I found certainly more irritating now than I did as a kid. Like, but. And now, I mean, as an adult, like I don't know. Can you like? I don't want to like filter everything through my 2021 eyes, but like he does seem a little bit more now like, oh, this is one of those nice guys I've been hearing about, like, because he's so obsessed with like what do women like, what's going to get me, but also, I mean, his saving grace is he does seem to have a pretty good heart. Like he wants to help, and I feel bad for him because he comes by and he's just trying to help, and Auntie Shrew ties him up in a bunch of yarn. Yeah. So
Auntie Shrew, I wrote Auntie Shrew is a Republican because not because she tied somebody up. They can do whatever they want in their own time. I'm just talking about she said something about like, you think life owes you, don't you? And I can't remember the exact line now, but he was like, yes, I am owed a living. And she was like, wrong, you have to work for it. And I was like, I caught the Republican. Anyway, so and if you're a Republican, I apologize for judging you. But it's okay because I don't have listeners. Auntie Shrew, and then, so I do think he has a good heart, and that's why I actually, another reason I did not like the scene where he sees the amulet on her, because it gets very predatory, and so it was such a turn for this character to suddenly have him leaning over her and like reaching towards her, and I just was like, am I supposed to fear him now? Like, was I wrong to believe that he was just like a goofy, kind-hearted character? So I wish that they had not done that at all.
I think it's just supposed to be like he likes pretty things and gets sort of transfixed by it. And I guess maybe that's also like he's a crow. I think that's a true thing about crows liking sparkly things. But the way it's presented does not... I don't know. I didn't find it funny even as a kid. I'm like, hey... That's her necklace. Yes. Hands off.
I mean, kids have a very, if they've been raised right, I suppose, they have a very strong sense of, like, what is right and what is wrong. And one of the first things that kids will understand is, that's mine. Like, you don't get to take what's mine. And, hey, give it back. And so, I can understand that, like, that would send a signal to a kid's brain of just, like, he is doing wrong. And so it was an interesting choice to make. And it's interesting. I don't know why I made this connection, because I have not seen Fern Gully since I was, like, whenever Fern Gully came out. I don't know when that was, but I was very small. But like this crow character reminded me of, I guess Fern Gully came out after, so I should say that the bat character that Robin Williams does is like the crow character, not the other way around. But it's just kind of this like eccentric, put in there just for kids, kind of goofy, sold by the name of the voice actor kind of thing. And I was also, I was going to accuse Don Bluth of trying to like one up Disney by stealing their voice actor, but then I think Oliver and Company actually came out after. So Dom DeLuise went to Disney after Don Bluth and not the other way around. None of this is interesting to anyone but me. Sorry, I'll move on. Why am I even talking? Auntie Shrew. So I think I've talked about this book. So there's a book called Shrill by Lindy West. And it's about feminism and like fat shaming and stuff. And she wrote, I think the very first section of the book was about the overweight characters that she had growing up to like influence her and like, you know, show her what society thought about overweight people. And one of them was Auntie Shrew. And she wrote about how it was a little on the nose to have a character who is a shrew named Auntie Shrew, who acts like a shrew. And it's like, okay, and all I wrote in my notes was, yes, she's right. Like, this is a character who is a shrew, figuratively and literally. And I think that they patted themselves on the back, like, isn't it funny the shrew is acting like a shrew? And I was like, I feel like that's some low-hanging fruit. Like, you could have done a little better.
Yes.
But,
No, I had that thought too. I was like, oh, okay, this has a lot of connotations I didn't realize when I was a kid. I mean, Auntie Shrew, when I was a kid, I would just be like mad at her
Yes.
because like her, she's introduced like, you know, having like just sort of monologuing about herself, and like the kids keep trying to tell her that Timmy's sick, and that's why Mrs. Brisby's not around and all this stuff, and she's just not paying attention until very late in the game. And then later on, like I said, she ties up Jeremy for no particular reason.
Yeah.
But I do give it a little respect too, though, because like she is shown to be this sort of obnoxious character on one end, but on the other end, again, like Jeremy, a character with a good heart, because you mentioned before the tractor starts up like earlier than expected, and Mrs. Brisby's like, I'm going to go stop that, and like leaps onto it, starts pulling out, you know, tubes or whatever in the motor but Auntie Shrew's right there with her.
Yes, she
is.
is.
Comes and helps, and I don't know, I think that does a lot for her character, actually.
Yeah, no, she cares in her own way. She's a bit cowardly and stuck up and whatever. There are two things that we do in our podcast that are just for fun. One of them is whenever you find a lesson, you point it out, because kids' movies and shows have lessons ostensibly, and we try to break down what the intended lesson is and what the actual lesson is. The other is a bad parenting alert, because sometimes in these shows and movies, the parents are really bad at their job. But Mrs. Brisby is good. It's just that Auntie Shrew ties up Jeremy, a very large animal, whom she believes to be in some way a threat. And she calls to the small children and is like, hey, guard this prisoner. I'm going to leave. And I was like, bad shrew babysitting. Like, that's, I feel like you shouldn't, they're small children, and if you suspect this creature to be in any way dangerous, they probably shouldn't be your guards. Like, maybe don't leave them alone. And I mean, obviously we as the audience know that they're safe, but she didn't. So I feel like she could have done a little better there. But overall, her intentions are good. So I'll give her a pass, I suppose. I may or may not do the sound effect for bad parenting alert there, but she, so she does, she tries, I guess. She tries in her own shrewy way. I wrote horrifying wind-up clown sailor toy is horrifying. And Timmy's room. That's not necessary. There's just, the art style is great. I think that I say this every time, but the animators definitely showed up to work. There's very rare time where I'll say that the animation is like lazy or bad, but in Timmy's room there was like this little like clown toy, and but after that, while she was singing to him, they did a great shot where the other children were standing in the doorway, and there was a mirror right next to the doorway that showed Timmy and Mrs. Brisby, and so they actually had all the characters side by side, and I thought that was really well done, art direction wise. See, I can say nice things sometimes too. It's just very rare. And then I figured out that NIM stands for the National Institute of Mental Health. And there was some nice dramatic irony there where Mrs. Farmer Person says that she hasn't noticed anything unusual with the rats while the rats are like sneaking by her window. Very nice.
Yeah.
Okay. And like having their Christmas lights and their rosebush and whatever. Good for them.
I like how the farmer and the wife, by the way, are sort of treated throughout the movie, because it is really so focused on our lead animal characters that they are seen sort of in the distance, like they are a threat, but only in so much as they don't kind of realize what they're doing to the animals. Like, you know, and I don't know, they're like overheard in a lot of cases and sort of just baffled by what's going on about like, these rats don't get caught in trap. Yeah, I liked it.
No, like the interesting thing is like, so they're less complicit than say the hunter in Bambi, but I'll put the cue here. I did find a lesson. And despite the fact that it wasn't the farmer and the wife, the lesson is tale as old as time. Man is the real monster because, but more specifically, animal testing is bad. Like they were just like, like testing, look at those sad monkeys and bunnies and stuff. Like animal testing is bad and man is the real monster. But also what I found interesting was kind of like an Animal Farm twist to it, because it wasn't until the rats were given like human levels of intelligence that they started plotting murder and also weird medieval like parliamentary things. Well, so like, you know, the fact that they didn't murder until they were, you know, human is like telling, I suppose.
The thing that I have with that is like, so they get like intelligence. Yeah, it's like animal testing is bad, except for, I don't know, like super intelligence. That's kind of cool. Like, but like they get intelligence, and then suddenly they start having very like, to bring up religion again, like a very traditional sort of moral concerns, where the big fight that they're having within themselves is whether they can keep stealing electricity from the farmer, like for their, you know, Rosebush Rat Society. And I honestly was like, guys,
just
the farmer's not going to notice that you're stealing electricity. Like humans have like tortured you. Like just take the electricity. This is not a moral quandary you have to worry about.
It's decent reparations. Like go to town, guys. I don't think you're using that much electricity. But no, it's like, we're stealing it. It's not even like a finite thing that they're stealing. Like we're stealing their supplies of grain. Like that I get. Like that. I mean, that's the kind of like message that Ratatouille attempts. I guess like there's a preview for our discussion of Ratatouille, but like this is just like, yeah, no, you got some light bulbs. Like you're fine.
Yes, I don't think it's taking
it's all good.
A lot of power to power your rat society.
Yeah.
I think you're fine.
I did write National Institute of Mental Health tries to treat depression. Whoops, we made rat wizards by mistake. So yeah, that was kind of what we were talking about earlier. Like I was just like, what mental health were they trying to analyze by just like making magical rats? But that makes sense that it was kind of shoehorned in. And that's why, because I was like, mental health wizards. But yeah, so yeah, they probably, I wrote Brutus needs to get laid. That's not what I was talking about. They probably could have just stayed. But I mean, like, again, it wouldn't have mattered, because in the end, like, she finds out that they're going to come and like dig up the rose bush or whatever. And so they have a reason to leave anyway. But, without that, they could have just been like, yeah, that's fine. Seems like a decent society. You can just keep on keeping on. That's the only time that Mrs. Brisby is a little slow on the uptake, I would say. It's like giant rat dude with spear. And she's like, hi, can I talk to Nicodemus? And he like tries to stab her. And she's like, no, really? Like, and I was like, no, leave. Like, don't stay and get stabbed by the electric spear thing. But yeah. So then she goes to this rat society. I gotta say, we are firmly in Act 2 before the plot shows up for this movie. Like, coming into it blind, I was sitting there ready to take notes. I was like, I overanalyze everything. And for the first 20 minutes, I was like, there's nothing here. Like, a mother cares about her children. Got it. Like, what is going to happen? Like, I didn't understand.
Yeah.
And then Act 2 comes, and suddenly we have a villain, and we have this rat society, and we have some sort of adventure involving the cat. And I was like, okay, we got there. Cool. All right. It just took a while. They took a little bit of too much time establishing the characters, I think. I guess the plow was supposed to be like the Act 1 conflict a little bit, but
I mean, I don't know. I have my experience of it. I agree that it has a kind of a weird rhythm. Like my experience is like the second act is when it starts to flag for me. Like just because all the stuff where like we go inside the rose bush and there's a bunch of like political intrigue and Nicodemus, you know, explains things. I mean, maybe it's because I know the plot at this point, so I don't need that stuff explained to me, but that's the stuff that bores me more, because, like, when I think about this movie, I think about it so much as just a series of set pieces where I'm like, okay, you know, I love her going to see Mr. Ages and, like, there's tinctures and potions around, and, like, they go down the little elevator, and I love her saving Jeremy and escaping the cat and, like, going down into the water underneath the water wheel, whatever it's called, I forget what they're called.
I think it is a water wheel.
And so like I like that. I like going to see the owl. It's creepy. There's a spider there, and he turns his head all the way around, and that's cool. And then like later on in the movie, and like I think the scene where she's ripping up the tractor is genuinely tense.
Mm-hmm.
And then later on in the movie, there's the scene where she like has to escape being captured, and she like scratches her arm, and like the cat's chasing her, and like that's scary. And then there's just the big end like swashbuckling fight, and I remember that stuff.
Yes.
But I don't know, like, but yes, the plot part.
Well,
for me,
it might be a little bit of a
in
Star
the
Wars
middle.
Episode 2 problem of just like how much do kids really care about like political proceedings and
Yeah.
like zoning issues.
Also, I was reading my friend Kevin Cecil's Letterboxd review of this, and like where he like basically comes down to the same place I do, where it's like, okay, this is gorgeous, but why is there magic? Is that like the plotting is a little weird too, where Nicodemus is watching Mrs. Brisby in his like porthole, where like this is one of the more confusing parts, because it's like, okay, I guess it's magic and science, because he's got like this like electrical portal that he like views what's going on in the world through, but he sees her like wondering what she's going to do about her problems, and someone tells her to go see the great owl, and Nicodemus is like, yes, a trip to the owl would be a good idea perhaps, and like uses like his magic influence to like sort of like push her along that path. And then after that, the owl just tells her to go to Nicodemus. So it's like, wait, why was there an intermediate step there? Why does Nicodemus want her to go to the owl to learn that she goes to Nicodemus? But whatever.
Yeah, no, and also I also wrote about that. I wrote two things. I wrote that Nicodemus has the entirety of the 2001: A Space Odyssey special effects sequence in his room, which is like she opens the door and like lasers shoot out, and I was just like, okay.
Yeah.
The other is, did she hear him? Because he's like, yeah, go to the Great Owl, and did she just like hear a voice in her head that was like, you are doing the right thing, go to the Great Owl? But otherwise, why is he like, yeah, do that? Like, I just said that it was like a scene transition. We should like more movies should use rat wizards as scene transitions when they need a time jump. Because I mean, time jump
just like cut to doesn't even influence the plot. It's like, yes,
No.
yes, that's a good idea.
Yeah, you know, like rom-coms, like, yeah, do go to that wedding after all. Yes, you should go. And then suddenly cut to and she's at the wedding and you don't even have to worry about the time jump. I do like when the Cynthia, I think her name is, the little mouse calls the crow a turkey, and my son Warren calls all birds chickens right now. And there actually are, so this is something that I'm from Los Angeles, so there's no wildlife in my past besides like the occasional lizard at my elementary school or rattlesnake. But like here, there is literally a group of wild turkeys that just like lives down the street in a field. And I like stared at them and I was like, I had to slam on the brakes because there were turkeys crossing the road. And I was like, what? But we would drive past them and Warren will look at them and go, chickens. And I'm like, well, yeah, close enough. So I felt that where she's like, oh, the turkey fell down. And it's like, yeah. The ending of the movie, as you said, is just kind of like swashbuckling. And then we already talked about how the amulet's just kind of like, okay, I'll fix this now. Kind of like, okay, we're done. The MacGuffin is doing its thing. And so like, we honestly don't have to talk much about that. I mean, we talked about how the crow finds a crow wife, and there's a lot of blood in this movie, like stabbings and bleedings, because she does cut her arm when she's in the bird cage or mouse cage or whatever. Like she cuts her arm then, just technically gory for a kid's movie. Technically, like it's not gore by my standards, but by a 5-year-old's it might be. And then, yeah, they're like, hey, Mom, will we ever go see those rats again? And she's like, yeah, maybe someday. And I both like that and dislike that, because like I like that like you said, it's not a love story. I thought that Justin was gonna like really move in on the widow, you know, which I was like also thinking about as like rat, mouse. I don't know how biology works. Like mules exist, so but like
it's true.
But
can't argue with that.
Yeah. So, but I was also like, I don't know if I want this to be a love story. She seems very dedicated to her husband, but no, it wasn't. And I was like, oh. Okay, cool. There's a love story with a crow. I guess that's how they got their love story like in there.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like they went through this entire adventure and then they were like, will we see all those characters we just met and spent a lot of time with? And she's like, maybe. And it's like, oh, well, all right. So we're done with that, I guess.
Well,
but, you know.
I think this is a more wistful animated movie. It has a different tone, and I like that about it, and I like the ending where it's just kind of like, I don't know. I don't know. Probably, yeah. Probably. And then Flying Dreams plays Paul Williams, who did the music for the Muppet movie, and you'll recognize him as the small strange man with the blonde bowl cut and glasses. He was in Phantom of the Paradise, and he did a lot of those songs as well. He did that just an old fashioned love song, and a lot of great hits of the 70s. Paul Williams singing the song from Secret of Nim, and Jerry Goldsmith did the score to this, and I don't know whether like the song at the end is quoted in the score a lot, and I don't know whether the score was written first and was then like a theme was taken to be turned into the song, or the song was written first and elements were written into the score. I would be interested to know. It would not change my life one bit, but I'm just kind of curious.
No, I love movie trivia. I'm the person who always watches the behind the scenes. Like, I own DVDs because I like watching the behind the scenes. For the Lord of the Rings trilogy, that takes longer than the actual movies. It takes a long time, but I loved it all. Anyway, all right. Well, the usual. Thank you for listening. Thank you for existing, and thank you for helping us to maintain our marbles for just one more week. I will do all the closing stuff later when I feel like it. So, why don't you just do the usual? Tell people where they can find you.
Well, I mean, if you're into Twitter, and I don't recommend it, you can find me at Dan K. McCoy. Hard to read it as anything but Dank McCoy. It's a reference to my middle name, Kirk, but Dank McCoy is me. You can find the Flophouse podcast. We talk about bad movies, but we're not like mean about it. Like, there's enough of that on the internet, guys. But I've got my funny friends Elliot and Stuart do that with me, and the Daily Show is off the air for the summer as we figure out what happens once we go back to the studio. But we'll be back in September if you're the kind of person who enjoys that kind of thing.
All right, so Dan has left now. I don't know if I did any transition music between then and now, but just pretend I did if I didn't. And I mean, by now, you're either not listening anymore or you know what I'm going to say. Our support sites are in the description below, as are links to the Flophouse and Dan's Twitter and stuff like that. And I wrote stuff. You can pre-order the romance compilation that contains my short story if you're okay with rated R sexual content and you are not related to me. Soon you will be able to order at least the hardcover, if not the paperback, and the hardcover of Hellbound. But the digital version of Hellbound is available in 2 platforms, and links to that are below as well. We have a merch store. Please rate and review. Big thanks to Dan McCoy. I appreciate that he put up with me. As any regular listeners will know, I am awkward. Next time we'll talk about Pup Academy and Air Bud production. I have a quiz for Alan. And until then, I'm Rebecca. My guest was Dan McCoy. My usual host is my husband, Alan. And we will catch you next time. Bye, friends.